Thank you all so much, Adelaide Damoah, Maurice and Ram Samocha, for taking part in the Performance Drawing 2021 online exhibition. This is part one of a two-part series of interviews with the artists who've taken part in the online exhibition. And Performance Drawing 2021 is a celebration of the first anniversary of the publication of the book Performance Drawing: New Practices Since 1945, published last year by Bloomsbury. Performance Drawing 2021 is hosted by the Centre for Recent Drawing, and we would like to thank Andrew Hewish, Daphne Astor, and the team at Centre for Recent Drawing for this 6-week residency that Birgitta, Hosea, Carali, McCall, and RNF Mo, myself, are taking part in, and also for the online exhibition that you, Adelaide, Maurice, and Ram are part of. We are keen to showcase and generate new ideas about art practice that intersect between drawing and performance. And towards that end, we have invited the participating artists to discuss their practice with us. We will be talking to Sophia Bartholomew and Piali Ghosh on Thursday, October the 7th. So tonight we welcome Adelaide Damoah. The London-based British Ghanaian multidisciplinary artist, Damoah uses investigative practice across photographic and painting mediums. She's exhibited in many shows with works in public and private collections nationally and internationally. Is a founding member of the Black British Art Female Artists Collective, BBFA, and in 2019, Damoah became the first Black artist to be appointed an academician, oh dear Lord, of the Royal West of England Academy, Bristol. Maurice Moore, the Californian-based artist, is currently a doctoral performance studies candidate at the University of California, Davis. Moore's critical essays, fictions, and visual works have appeared in many publications, including Harbour Review, Wicked Gay Ways, Communication and Critical Culture Studies Journal, and Queer Cats, a journal for LGBTQ studies. Moore has been awarded numerous residencies and taken part in conferences in the US and UK. And Ram Samocha, the Israeli-born UK-based artist, curator and educator, Samocha's work focuses on the issues of personal and global transformation, combining drawing with video, sound, installation, and live performance. Samocha's work has been exhibited and is included nationally and internationally in various museums and collections. And he's the founder and director of Draw to Perform, an international community for drawing performance practice. Thank you for your patience, everyone. So if we could first look at Adelaide's work, and if you have any questions you'd like to ask any of us, please feel free to do so later. Adelaide, can you show us your work, please, and tell us how you came to be interested in performance and drawing, and talk to us about your making process.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining. Thank you, Maryclare, for that amazing introduction. Yes, I am a painting and performance artist. I've been practicing now for coming up to 17 years, but my performance practice has really been since around 2017. My performance practice really is me using my body and sometimes my voice. In the particular performance I'm going to be speaking about this evening, it's called A Litany for Survival, which is named after the poem by Audre Lorde. I was actually invited to create a performance by a national charity that was specifically in response to the Syrian refugee crisis. They're called the Rural Refugee Network. And what they asked me to do was to create a performance which really spoke to the struggle that the Syrian refugees had to face as families in settling here in the UK. And so in doing that, they introduced me to a couple of the people that they worked with. I had conversations. I tried to read around as much as possible because as somebody who was born and raised in the UK, of Ghanaian heritage, I had no idea what it's like to experience that. So I tried to immerse myself in that as much as possible and come up with this performance piece. So I'll show you the piece and then I'll speak a bit more about it. It's a video with a piece that came at the end of the video. Screen. Okay, so that's the video, and I'll just show you, this is the final piece. Basically, the idea was that I strapped my feet while I was covered in, my arms and my legs were covered in paint, and strapped my feet using resistance bands to the pillar that was behind me. And the performance is really about showing the feeling of struggle. So I'm trying to move forward, and all the time I keep on getting pulled back. So every time I take a few steps or kind of crawl forward a little bit, I'm pulled back some, but I never go all the way back. So it's kind of like that idea of 2 steps forward and 1 step back until it gets to the end, where finally the resistance band snaps, and I'm able to get up and walk away, hence the footsteps there. So I'll just show you a couple of more close-ups. So this right at the beginning, that's the full piece. This is sort of the middle. Yeah, so let me just bring it back to stop sharing. And I'm back. So essentially, for me, this performance was really intense. I intentionally decided to not have sound included in the video, because for me, to speaking about this, using my body and the performance in the way that I did it, was about silent struggle, because most of us don't get to have any understanding of what's actually going on with people who go through this. And I subsequently did it, a variation of the same performance in Morocco last year. So this was originally filmed in 2019, not in front of an audience. It was just me and the camera, and the cameraman and an assistant. And 2020, just before the lockdown, I did it in Morocco as a part of 154 art fair, like a fringe event that was happening in front of an audience in a tent. It was very, very enclosed, loads and loads of people around me. The end result was slightly different, but the idea was exactly the same. And the intensity that was gathered in that space with all of those people around was a very different feeling to the intensity that I felt when it was just me and those 2 people in the room and the camera making the performance. So for me, this is a really important performance. I found it really quite interesting, the connection that a lot of people made, including you guys, have made with that particular performance and drawing, because almost like drawing with the body, because for me, I've always thought of my practice especially when it comes to these kinds of performances, as painting with the body. But I'm thinking that because of the monochromatic element of it and it being black against the white, that's why it gives it that kind of feeling, which is interesting for me. But yeah, this performance is, it's a highly emotional, intense performance that generates a really intense emotional response from the audience. What I find interesting about performance compared to my 2D work, for example, is the ability of the performance itself to collapse the space between the audience and the artist. And in doing so, allowing for empathy, intersubjectivity, and this kind of two-way communication between the audience and myself, such that I've had, and specifically in this performance, the one that I did in Morocco, audience members were crying on me at the end of it. It had that level of intensity, which was totally unexpected for me. It's happened in other performances where I was using my voice. In this case, the audience was able to feel my struggle because they heard me breathing, they heard me struggling, as well as saw me struggling. And then the room was very hot, close, intense. So it was a very highly emotional experience for everybody concerned. So for me, that's the really exciting and interesting thing about this type of performance. But not all of my performance practice involves using my body in this kind of way. So sometimes I will speak, I have another performance piece called Into the Mind of the Colonizer, and I speak to the audience and invite the audience to participate by cutting my clothes off, and then I then engage in the body printing process after that. But instead of dragging myself, I'm actively printing myself, which is a nod to Yves Klein's 1960 anthropometries, as well as Yoko Ono's 1965 cut piece, where she's talking about violence against the female body, but in this case, I'm talking about violence against the African body, violence against Africa as well, with my body standing in for the continent of Africa and the scramble for Africa and all of that. And then another performance I did in 2020, just at the end of the first lockdown, when things just started to open up, and I had a solo exhibition and I did a performance to close the exhibition, and that one was just speaking. It wasn't, this was the first time in years where I hadn't used my body in the way that I usually do with painting and mark making. I stood there, I performed a ritual, and then I read a poem that I wrote, which was really a mythologizing of my entire family and friends, talking through a mythological version of the story of what we'd been through, coming out of the other side, kind of a revaluation of the self. And it was called Revaluing the Self. So an inner apocalypse, so to speak, during that whole lockdown period, and then coming out the other side as something different, something metamorphosed, something better in a lot of ways, and someone with a lot more empathy than before going in. So yeah, that is a brief summary of that performance and how it kind of connects to some of the other performances I've done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was remarkable, Adelaide. I'm very grateful, and thank you so much. Can we now please, Maurice, would you like to please show us the work that you have on the online exhibition and talk to us about your process, please? Are you there, Maurice?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I'm about to show you. Technically, that's not the work. That's sort of the leftovers of the work. The piece is called Drawing While Black, aka Black Boy Joy. There are different pieces within the piece. This is sort of a drawing from that performance that the audience get to engage with, like visually, while I'm making the performance and after the performance. And the piece that I submitted is this. This is me during the performance. And ordinarily, I do not know what is going on in the performance because I'm blindfolded. So the only hints that I have is what you, the viewers, or the people who engage with the piece, tell me about it when we have conversations. But the Drawing While Black, aka Black Boy Joy, basically drawing with my senses. I think I was formally trained to draw with my eyes and my hands. And when I started to think about how the other senses may inform the way that I render and make marks, I start to blindfold myself, and then it became more performative. And that's where I think the performative element starts to get in. So like, what does the drawing taste like? What does the drawing smell like? What does the drawing like feel like physically or emotionally? So just thinking about how our senses inform the marks that we make, and then add on to being a Black person in a Black body, in a fat Black body, and being queer and genderqueer and neurodiverse. You know, what are queer drawings? If you've ever watched Pose or been around queer people, it's like you know what queer aesthetics are, but like what are queer drawings? And like, you know, I can snap my fingers like queer, and I feel like for me that's like queer mark making, that's queer drawing. So it's like me trying to figure out what Black aesthetics are, what African American diaspora aesthetics are, what queer aesthetics are, because they exist and they've existed for a long time. But like, how do I make them with my work? And just questioning everything. Like, is it Black just because I say it's Black? Is it Black because I'm Black? Like, what makes my drawings Black? Because I was formally trained, I mainly went to PWIs, that's predominantly white institutions. Most of the people who taught me about drawing have not been Black, queer people, or out Black and queer people. Most of the people that we learned about, at least from my end, in terms of the masters, they weren't Black people. Most of the techniques, and some of them may have been appropriated, they weren't from Black people. So, and most of the people who engaged with my work when I was in school, they weren't Black. So it's just like questioning what makes my work Black. Is my work really Black? And it is, but it's just like, what does that mean for a Black artist or a queer artist or a neurodiverse artist? So that's sort of what I'm exploring with the piece, the Drawing While Black part of it. When you get to the Black Boy Joy, or the Black Joy, like, what does that feel like to be Black on your own terms, to be queer on your own terms, to be neurodiverse on your own terms? So when I'm performing, sorry, trying to turn off there. When I'm performing the piece, you know, I'm blindfolded, and it's just like I'm in my own world. And I feel like when you are a person of color or a queer person, you're always constantly worrying or concerned about, you know, not dying, and your safety, and being aware of your body and how other people perceive you. When I'm blindfolded, technically I don't have to do that. I kind of let some of that anxiety go about worrying about, you know, people being terrified of my big Black queer body and like what that means. So I get to experience joy and creating a space, a safer space, with this piece. And also just being okay with joy. I feel like a lot of people focus on our blues when we're Black, our pain. And I feel like it gets to a point where it's trauma porn. And I feel like those things are important and those things need to be present, but there are other hues when it comes to being Black or being queer. So like, you know, what does joy look like? And it's okay to experience joy and laughter and ecstasy. Because I feel like people want to push Black pain on me and kind of feed off of it. So those are some of the things I'm kind of working with this piece, and I'm still going along with it and pushing it through. Some other things about the piece. For me, I think it's like interesting that I get to kind of turn my back on the audience I don't know what you all are doing. I don't know if you're paying attention. I don't know if you care. You may just run out of the room for 3 minutes and then come back when it's done. And I think there's something interesting about that because I was talking to, I've talked to many people and it's like, you're telling me about the piece and I feel like the audience gets to be a part of the piece and what it means for you. And I feel like there's something interesting there with the audience. You get to tell me about what you saw, what you experienced. And I think it's okay that we experience different things when we engage with art, because I feel like when I say that I create certain pieces for certain people, I'm centering certain people, it's for those people, but it doesn't mean that if you don't identify with those ways of being, that you still can't engage with the piece. I guess it's now I'm interested in what people are engaging with, who aren't Black, who aren't queer, who aren't neurodiverse, because it's just like, some things I do think are universal, but like, what are you engaging with? Is it just entertainment? Is it just a spectacle? Like what is it about this work that I'm doing that you're engaging with? Because I am saying I'm centering Black queer people, and that just means I'm making work with them in mind. I'm using a V, I'm thinking about Black aesthetics. And that's what it means when I'm centering. But I'm also interested in knowing what those Black queer people think about the piece, but also what people who aren't, because people keep saying that they feel something or they're engaging with the piece. So that's sort of what I've been working on and thinking about with this work. I don't want to go over time, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Maurice. That was very interesting. Your take on dancing, not seeing what you're doing, not knowing what other people are looking at, and celebrating the joy. That was lovely. Thank you so much. Now, Ram, for our last presenter. Ram, are you there?
Yep.
Can you please show us the work that you have exhibited and talk to us about your practice?
Okay, hi everybody, and thank you for being here, and thank you three for the online and all the activities that you sharing with us. I'll try to do it shortly, so I'll share the screen with you, and I'll go from share screen. Here we go. Okay, so I think I'll start with from where it all came to me. So I will. Can you see the screen? Is it okay?
Yes, yep.
Okay. So for me, it all began in 2004 when I first done my drawing performance, live drawing performance, and so it was with public and people engage with it, and it came from the need to communicate with the other people, and it was kind of it was a 4-hour performance, and it was really after that it was really like a very intense, and opened my eyes to the possibility of communicating through a live and combination between drawing and performance. But fast forwarding to a pandemic time, I managed to travel with my family. Sorry, it's here. I managed to travel with my family to take the car and drive in August 2020 from here in the UK to Switzerland. So we isolated ourselves in the mountains and had a lovely time in August. And people kept telling us there, the locals, you should come in the winter. It's so beautiful in the winter. The snow is amazing. And all this visit, I was just thinking how I was thinking about this performance that came into my mind, kind of like painting the mountains with white as it is in the winter. And because it was a family thing, there was no time to do it. But I managed, like half an hour before we drove back, to make it happen. So the two of my daughters are holding this cellophane in front of the mountains, and I'm using the condensed milk to draw the outline of those mountains as they are beautifully in the winter. So yeah, and it is a sketch, because it's quite a short sketch, because I am imagining, I don't know if it will ever happen, but I'm imagining it on a panoramic glass or perspex or whatever, which is stable, and I can do it permanently in the field, so people that are traveling or hitchhiking can be in certain point and experience this drawing live as they are in the space itself, in the nature. So yeah, this is more or less the video that I'm showing in the virtual exhibition. Yeah, I don't know, like there's quite a lot of things. There are the draw to perform that I'm running from 2013, and there is the Instagram performance that I did just a few days ago in this frame of the events that you're rating. So overall, there are many things to talk about, but I think maybe we can stop sharing. Maybe we can open it up for questions or whatever.
That's a good idea. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ram. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Are we all back again? Now, I see there are a couple of questions in the chat there. Elizabeth Thomas, to everyone. I think you were talking about Adelaide. Hello, Elizabeth. Adelaide, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Yeah. There is a question. Elizabeth, would you like to ask Adelaide directly?
Yeah, sure. I was just really interested in what you said, Adelaide, about the sound, you know, the fact that you deliberately removed it for the video, which is an interesting choice. And then the fact that obviously you wouldn't have been able to mask that in the live context. And you were saying about it being sort of differently intense. So I wondered if the sound was part of that, and therefore what you felt about the sound when it was in the live context, and how that felt to do that in that way.
Yeah, it was interesting because, I mean, the two performances were I had different reasons behind them. So the original one, A Litany for Survival, was done specifically for the charity, and it was specifically speaking to the whole idea of what the Syrian refugees were going through as families trying to settle in the UK, all of the issues they have to face, not to mention what they've been through to get here in the first place, but all of the different myriad of things that they have to go through with regards to registering their children in schools, with regards to learning a completely foreign language, with regards to settling in the countryside somewhere where they don't know anybody, with regards to getting benefits, with regards to being able to get jobs, and all of these things, you know, something happening, and then all of a sudden some red tape thing happens and it pulls you back, or you hear news of a family member who has been blown up back home. All of these kinds of things that these real people were experiencing, that the majority of us have no idea about. Like we just, you know, it could be happening right in front of your face, right? But we are so blinded, right, that we can't see. And even if it's presented to you, the majority of the time we are so blinded by all of the images and videos and things that we're constantly being bombarded with in the press, on social media. So these things, their suffering is going on in silence, right? So in the idea was to have this documentation of a visual struggle that you can't ignore, right? It's really very direct. And so hence the reason for removing the sound, but you can feel that there's this silent struggle going on. You can't ignore it. So the one that happened in Morocco was changed slightly in that, firstly, it was speaking to a completely different thing. So in that context, it was in the context of an exhibition that was really speaking to Malian women, right, where Mali got independence in the 1960 specifically, and it was an exhibition of photographers, Malian photographers, who were documenting what was happening during the independence struggle, and it was specifically of women. And the more I researched what was happening at that time, the more I understood that actually Mali had the highest incidence of FGM, female genital, one of the highest incidences of FGM. Yet these images of these women, when I looked at the statistics, probably the majority of them had gone through that. So that was one of the things. Obviously, because of the fact that it was in front of an audience, it was very important for me to for them to have an authentic experience of the performance, that everything was experienced for them. That was the only way that they could authentically feel what I was feeling, really try and understand that this is a struggle, and it's a struggle that so many women can relate to. And in this context, was talking specifically about African women, but there were so many women of all races in that audience who really understood what I was saying, which is that there's this struggle that so many of us have had to go through in different ways, and then come out the other side triumphant, being able to walk away and shrug all of that off and leave it behind. And so there's this positive thing, this joyous kind of freedom of walking away at the end of the thing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but really it felt, I think another thing you said was, how did it feel? For me, whenever I do any kind of performance in front of an audience, there's a feeding that happens. There's this two-way conversation that happens between the performer and the audience. There's this exchange of energy, right, that goes on. And that is, in the moment, you are completely consumed by the performance. Before any performance I do, I have this whole ritual where I fast for 24 hours, I meditate, I really get myself in the zone. So by the time the performance is happening, I'm just there, I'm in the zone. I'm not thinking about what I'm feeling. I'm just doing the thing as authentically as it's possible for my body to take part in the thing that's happening at that moment in time. And then at the end, then you get this rush of emotion, and then you think back, and then you have the performance high and all of that. But for me, that exchange that happened at the end, when I had so many women coming and hugging me in tears, telling me what the intensity of emotion that they experienced through not only witnessing what was happening, but also hearing the sound, hearing the struggle for breath, and then seeing me get up, take a breath, and be able to walk away. So all of those elements were really important for that particular performance in that context. Don't know if that answers the question.
Superbly, that was amazing. And I think really powerful as well to hear the way that a performance can be reshaped into different contexts and then have that level of potency, but in a really different way. That's incredible. Thank you for the detail in your answer. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Adelaide. Birgitta wants to ask you a question. Birgitta?
No, I think Adelaide's already answered the question I was going to ask.
The role of documentation.
So Adelaide very sort of eloquently said that the power of live performance as opposed to performing for the camera. So I wonder if I could put that question to Maurice and Ram, because Maurice, I was very interested that you don't feed off your audience in the work you showed because you're blindfolded. So you're disregarding the audience, and that is giving you an energy and a power so I was interested as well in the role of documentation in your work. What's more important in your work? Is it because you're studying performance, you're like a performance studies researcher, so what is more important in your work? Is it the process of the performance, or is it what you end up with? Is it the drawing you end up with in the end?
I think in terms of like whatever an end piece is, I've been working on this piece performance since like 2017, but I've been Black for 39 years now. So it gets kind of complicated to like, what an end is. But I like that I get to ask the question, like, does this work have to be archival? Can it be non-archival? And I think some aspects of it can, because like what I'm doing right now with my hand, I'm mark making, and it's only for us in the group and who is engaged with the work, but like that's okay. In terms of what's most important in terms of documentation, I think us as creatives, we get to decide what is the archives for us, or what is a citation for us, because no one ever asked me like, to make like a bibliography with my work, but I think that it's important that we start questioning, or I've been questioning, why don't people ask for a bibliography? I think in a way they are, but we just have different ways of making a bibliography or citing our sources. In terms of that, I can actually draw, I guess, well in a way, or the work can be in the gallery. I think those are citations for us. So like that's how I'm sort of documenting work. But it's also like just figuring out like what is it to document a piece. And I just don't think it's like one thing that is most important. For right now that I'm talking about the work, it's a form of documentation. But in terms of the performance, I like the performance because I get to keep some things to myself. And there are things like, because I'm in my blindfolded world, there are things that you don't know. And I like playing with that in terms of an art making. Because I think like, maybe it's like Western or American that we think everything is for us, so that we should have access to everything that a person creates. And like when you're Black or when you're queer, people are always, asking us questions. And I'm like, no, that's sort of important with the work.
Yeah, we were interested in your blindfold, your mask, what it was made of, and what significance that had for you. We were thinking about Joseph Beuys and all kind of different references in seeing your mask, and you seem to have flower petals on the floor.
Yeah. The mask kind of represents, I think it's like I have feminine and masculine energy, and also different types of energies that can't be named because I'm like gender non-binary and genderqueer. But the flowers just remind me of like Marsha P. Johnson, how they wear flowers in their hair. So that's why I like put flowers on the mask. But like I can't breathe because I don't put holes in the mask. And I think there's like a danger to it. And for some reason, it makes me think of I've heard like Black people say I can't breathe if someone was murdered, and saying that, but it's like almost putting myself in danger to make that piece and kind of pushing yourself. Like there's like a danger to being Black. Like there's certain performances. I can't just go into a bank and say, give me your money, and say it's a performance, I can die. But I know other people could do that. There's like a danger to some of the practices that we do as artists and creators, and I don't think that everybody gets like some of the dangers, but it's sort of the mask, and it's like, it's just interesting to like I'm masking sort of things, or I'm passing in certain ways, or I have to code switch or code mesh in certain instances. And when I'm doing that performance, I don't have to do those things, or I do those things on my own terms. But the mask kind of represents a lot of different things with the piece. In terms of the blindfold, in a way, yes, I am turning my back on the audience, and certain things are hidden. But you know, and I have loud music playing, so I can't hear you either, but I can feel the warmth sometimes of the sun. I can feel the breeze of the door open. So there's some instances where I know that there's people there. So it's just like different ways of interacting with the audience, like different mark making ways that I hadn't considered in the past. Like what does it mean to, you know, have an audience there, and also just not care about the audience. I think one of the joyful parts of the piece is I don't have to constantly do that balance and negotiating that it comes with being queer, being other, or being Black with that piece. That's sort of where the joy kind of comes from. And I also get to put myself in danger or put myself in harm. And it seems weird that that could be joyful, but it's like I'm controlling my own life, my own breath on my own terms. So that's some of the things about the piece.
It's so fascinating to hear Adelaide's powerful description of an audience moved to tears through their empathy, and then to hear your strategy of shutting the audience out in order that you feel empowered. So yeah, thank you for that. And Ram, I just wondered, you've got a lot of experience of live performance, but during lockdown, you've been doing more sort of online and video and performances to camera. What's your thoughts about documentation, and what's more important than the end product of the drawing or the process of performing? And what do you think about a live audience versus a camera?
Yeah, well, things are changing, right? It's been you know, like a transition. For me, this piece that I'm showing here in the online exhibition is kind of like it is a thing that's done while you are trying to still be creative in a time that is very challenging. You know, like we moved to work from home. The studio become something that is quite close. That's one of the things why I organized the studio visit by Draw to Perform, the online ones, and yeah, I think it's I found it really important to share things with others. It can be an online thing. It can be a Facebook thing or an Instagram thing, or just documenting with the camera while you are with the kids and doing something completely, you know, random. And I see more and more artists sharing their process nowadays. They don't have to be a performance artist. I think they're forced to be performance artists, actually, because there's no other way. And that's why this practice becoming getting more and more attention, because it's a tool. It's one of the tools that you can use to share with the other people what you're doing now. And yeah, and so.
Yeah. I'm just saying also along that with Penny just leaving, but just to follow up, she does say about the impact of the materials. And I think, Ram, that's like it also with just the materials that you have. I love this like happenstance of like what you have around you, and that really DIY kind of approach to just doing something. And I think that's the thing of the where performance, and I think also with Adelaide and Maurice and yourself too, the vulnerability that you allow yourself to be, so you really do offer yourself, even though there's like maybe an awareness of a performance or an audience, I mean, and or maybe not. And I think even then it's really about sharing ultimately some kind of placement of yourself to the work. And I think that's especially in your kind of like, you know, the role of the artist, even within a family setting or a larger, huge context that is representing a whole emotional thing. There's lots of power and impact in various ways. And I think that's what's really interesting, especially like, you know, you don't know what's going to come out in the talk tonight. But so I just thank you all for that. And maybe those with materials too. I think everyone's materials are fairly the body, you know, chalk, on hand. I don't
pick up on that discussion of materials, because I was dying to ask you about your use of black paint, because for me it really made me think about petrol and oil. And I wondered if you thought of using any substances other than paint.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Well, for that particular performance, it was more of an aesthetic choice, and the other choice in terms of the colour. And in terms of other materials, yes, the colonizer performance, I used red, but it wasn't paint, it was food dye. So I covered myself, I mixed food dye with a bit of body paint, right, to look as close to blood as I could get it. And then I reactivated that because it would dry, dried on my body before the performance actually started. And then I reactivated it with shea butter specifically from Ghana, because I was speaking about colonialism. I was speaking about the violence against the African continent, but both of my parents are Ghanaian, so it was in a very Ghanaian context, and all of the clothes I was wearing were Ghanaian traditional attire that were given to me by my mother. So it was very important to have that Ghanaian connection. So usually the colours I choose, whether it's for performance or in my 2D practice, there's a specific reason why I'm choosing those colours, depending on what it is that I want to talk about. And the majority of the time when I've chosen black, it's usually as a representative of representation of blackness, right? Whereas when I've used gold and gold leaf, and that is specifically a reference to Gold Coast, because Ghana was formerly British Gold Coast, where I've used red. Like I say, I'm talking about not only the blood from oppression and violence, but also the blood of family ties, right, and culture and heritage, and right now I'm using crazy bright pinks and luminous yellows and bright purple, because I'm working on a series called Radical Joy, where and that came out of lockdown. I'm using just dry pigment and doing body prints and using David Hammond's technique and setting it with setting spray, and that is to maintain as much of the intensity of those colors as possible to express that joyfulness and the joyfulness of coming out of this dark period, right? But also attaching that to the joy of being in my own body, the joy of being alive, the joy of experiencing love and passion and desire, and all of those things that make you feel alive as a body in your body, and really taking time to go into myself and think about just process, as opposed to think about process and all of those things, the joy, the passion, the love, all of that, as opposed to what Maurice was talking about in terms of Black struggle and all of that kind of thing. And not only that, I speak about feminism and spirituality, really quite deep, heavy topics. And now for me, it's a time for lightness. It's a time for just being about me, and joy, radical joy. That's a really long-winded answer. I hope I answered the question.
That's great.
Yeah, we move to Maurice and ask you about the materials you use and why you choose them and what they mean to you.
In terms of materials, I think just when I think of a thought of drawing, it's like I go into a store and try to get some paper, and none of the paper looks like the skin. And why is that? You know, so I think like everything is racialized, everything is gendered. You know, these things exist just down to our materials. So drawing on a blackboard, but it's actually like a dark forest green. Like, what does that mean? So I started there questioning my materials, like why am I drawing on this paper that doesn't look like me or my mom or my grandma or my dad or just the people in the world? And for a lot of you, it doesn't look like your skin either, unless it's some, or I get some special paper made. But like questioning materials in that way, also bringing in class, because I tend to, whatever materials I have to make a drawing, I make a drawing. So if I draw notebook paper, I draw a paper that's like really expensive. You know, that doesn't make the work better because you draw on $100 sheets of paper, but some people think that, but it's just like, where is the classism that exists in our materials? So starting to bring those things in terms of materials in. But for this performance, you know, the materials, I am the material. My Black body, my queer body, it is a material as well. And just, you know, also a material, like, you know, what I engage with when I'm blindfolded. I think of my mom dancing because she tends to shimmy when she dances, or I think about like my other ancestors. Some of them were queer, and I've seen images and recordings of them dancing too, like Marlon Riggs or Marsha B. Johnson. But just having, that's what I'm visualizing when I'm dancing, when I'm doing that piece performing, and it's just like my ancestors are with me, and the people who are with me now in the communities, and also our descendants in the future. So those are some of my materials that sort of help me make the piece. And I think also the flower petals, because they are not archival, they're not going to last for 1,000 years, so they're going to break down. And I like that part of our materials, and just you know, me making a mark in the air, you know, those are materials as well. So I think just questioning what materials we use and why we use them, and how they also intersect with our different identities and ways of being, have like helped me kind of push the piece a little further.
Okay, and Ram, if I can just ask one more question, like about your use of materials, because I've noticed that recently your choice of materials are almost about a performance of masculinity. So you've been using electronics, and you've been using grinders and metal. And I wonder if that had been a conscious choice to try and explore non-traditional materials, and if there was any kind of performance of masculinity about the choice of those materials.
Yeah, thanks. Well, it's funny because, you know, in this work that is just behind me, it's just, I'm fascinated with materials. I love materials. I always love to find new materials and to work with new materials, as many other artists does. But for me, it's like, it's in my blood, experimenting with materials. And I guess this is how I, when I thought about this sketch, I was thinking about how to, well, it's kind of like, you know, like, it's, you can see behind me, it's supposed to be pastoral, or it's supposed to be a nice picture in Switzerland, but actually using milk and getting into this result is, it's kind of like, yeah, well, I'm still with the frame of sexuality, I guess, in a way, and maybe concording the landscape, and you mentioned masculinity. So yeah, it's there, and it was in a family union, but that's me, and that's what I'm. That's what interesting me, the questioning. Many questions about who am I, and what I am, and especially in a certain situation that affects me, and that's where the materials come to life.
Somebody else want to ask a question?
I just wanted to ask everyone, well, I wanted to thank you all so much for giving us such extraordinary presentations. And quickly, I wanted to ask each one of you if you could identify what drives your practice in particular. If there is any one thing that actually, you know, gets you into the studio to do it. Adelaide, could you answer that, please?
That's an interesting one. I don't know that there's any one thing that drives me, aside from a genuine excitement and joy that I have the privilege of being able to live this life and make this work every day. Like I don't have a 9 to 5, you know, I get to do this full time, you know, as my life. So it's my life, it's my obsession. So I do it because there are things that I want to say. There are things that I have to say. It's almost like a compulsion. So I don't know if there's necessarily one thing that drives that. That drive has always been there. And because of the fact that I now do this to live, I get the privilege of being able to really deeply research the things that I'm interested in and put that into my practice. And I suppose a part of that is maybe we all have some kind of inbuilt desire to imprint ourselves on this world forever, so that we make ourselves somehow invincible. Maybe there's something of that where there's a desire to leave something like a legacy, you know, and to become somehow part of the canon of this art world that we are so passionate about. So that when I'm gone, somehow I've left some kind of impact. So maybe that's at the core of it, ego. I don't know, but it's for me just to go to the studio every day and make work and think and read is an absolute joy and the privilege.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you. Maurice, could you answer that, please? Can you identify any one thing that drives your practice?
I would say our future, I guess, descendants. I'm thinking about the ancestors always. I'm thinking about us and our communities now, but my future descendants, like they're possibly engaging with this piece now, 400 years from now. In some way, maybe they communicating with us. I don't know. But there's just something interesting about like Afrofuturism or Afro-surrealism or Afro-bubblegum and different types of speculation or speculative things that we create. So that's usually what is driving me now, that I get to make work and I get to like represent us in a lot of different ways. I also think it's important to think that our future descendants will not be dealing with any of the things that we are dealing with now, and they may not even care, like, okay, but we got over racism and sexism and all of the isms. So they're coming at it in a different way, and I think it's important to kind of think about different futures and different possibilities where they aren't, I guess, bombarded or dealing with any of the things that come with pain or violence. I don't know, this is something interesting about some of the pieces that I'm able to create now. So that drives me, that gets me into the studio.
Thank you, Maurice. Ram, can we ask you, can you identify any one thing in particular?
It's a big question, Maryclare. Yeah, well, I'll do it shortly. Seriously, we're all traveling in time. We are in flux. We are experiencing for the first time what is it to live, and we're going from being young to being older, and that's what drives me, like understanding things and process things that are happening to me, my body, and the place that I'm in, and that's why a series of works came alive. So like when I started to understand that I'm getting there something, so I started to do in my 20s a series of painting about boldness, or about being hairy or not hairy, and is it right or not right, and about many things. And lately working with the drill is because I'm working with different parts of my body and not with my hand, because I'm starting to understand that this hand won't be that powerful forever. So I'm just like checking, and people can say, wow, but you're still very powerful. But but it's there, you know, like the seeds is there. And once you are understanding it, it's occupied my mind and my thought, and that's what drives me, yeah, to keep on.
Keep on going on.
And express, yeah.
Thank you so much. Birgitta, would you like to sum up?
To sum up, well, just thank you very much. Did anyone else want to ask any more questions? Was our hour is up? But...
Yeah, and just also, I noticed that Sophia and Piali are here in the audience with us too, and we'll hopefully be able to kind of continue this kind of same but different conversation in I guess a week and 2 days time. And I guess in that sense, yeah. But I guess the collapsing of drawing and performance, I think it's just, I was just thinking about how lucky I feel to think that you know, maybe that term or those two processes in our practice have kind of brought us together in some kind of shape or form. So I appreciate that, and how we keep thinking about where's the performance and what is drawing, and yeah, what's our version of ourselves in the work. I think I appreciate that everyone has comes from different places and with different ideas, but we kind of can merge in some kind of space and time at this wonderful kind of crazy world that we live in today. So yeah, that's my kind of wrap up thoughts, and I look forward to seeing you guys all again and drawing in other kind of worlds. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate, and I also, Adelaide, enjoyed you talking about collapsing the space. I thought that was extraordinary, and very moving the way you talk about your practice. Thank you. And Maurice, I enjoyed very much that you wore a mask, but you also, it's almost like a child, you're wearing a mask and you're going, but you can't see me, so I can't see you.
That's cute. Yeah, that's
you
right.
know, you're neither of, I can't see you, so you can't see me. And anyway, you can, and all of that. The play with that was delightful. I love.
I love your movement.
And thank you, Ram, so much. A really interesting and revealing discussion about materials and processes. You've all been very generous. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And it's been an honor to talk to you all and to listen about your practices. Birgitta, over to you.
I've got nothing else to say. Thank you very much. It's been really
just thank you for this platform and for this amazing book that opens so many options for the future for quite a lot of people.
Great. Well, we hope to see you all next week to listen to Piali and Sophia talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
Again.
Really enjoyed it.
Have a great night. Good time in the studio. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good
so
night,
much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.